self-discipline, and obedience. But the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "Because you did not trust in me enough to honor me as holy in the sight of the Israelites, you will not bring this community into the land I give them." Numbers 20:12. If there is one thing we should have learned by now, it is that God's ways are not man's ways. We shouldn't be surprised when God moves in a different direction, different from what we were expecting, or when his instructions to us are different today than they were yesterday. We shouldn't be surprised when God demands obedience and insists on all the glory. He is God, after all, and we are his creation. During their time of wandering in the desert, the children of Israel encountered the army of the Amalekites, and a battle ensued. God gave Moses some unique instructions. Stand on top of the hill and hold up your staff over the valley where the fighting is taking place. As long as Moses held his staff high, the Israelites were winning. But when he lowered his staff, the Amalekites began to win. As the day went on and Moses got tired, his brother, Aaron, and his nephew, Hur, helped him hold up his arms, and the Israelites prevailed. Of course, God could have wiped out the Amalekites with one swift blow, but he wanted to teach his people about obedience. He wanted them to develop self-discipline and learn how to take instruction, even when the instruction didn't seem to make sense. To have spiritual authority in the battles of life, we must have both self-discipline and strict obedience to God's word. Sometime later, as the Israelites continued their wandering, the people complained that they were thirsty. So God gave Moses these instructions. Go up to that big rock and speak to it, and water will come forth. Moses instead hit the rock with his staff, which is what God had told him to do with success in a similar situation years before. By the grace of God, water still came forth, and the people drank and were filled. But by striking the rock rather than speaking to it, Moses had disobeyed the Lord. He had taken for himself the glory that belonged only to God. Based on past experience, he thought he had the whole water from a rock thing down. As a result of this disobedience, Moses was not allowed to go into the promised land. God knew what was ahead for his people, and he knew the kind of leader they needed. They needed a leader who would listen to him closely and be willing to do things his way, even when it was different than previous ways. They needed a leader who would be willing to lay aside tradition and follow God without deviation into the new territory. 40 years of wandering in the desert had turned Moses into a traditionalist. But now that the Israelites were about to enter the promised land, God knew they needed a leader who would not simply follow the ways of the past, a leader who would listen to his exact now instructions and do things his way, rather than repeating old ways. So Moses stayed behind when the Israelites crossed over the Jordan. What was once the right way was not the right way anymore. Today, God is calling his people, once again, to a new level of self-discipline and obedience. It is not enough to just go to church and do the same things over and over again. The ones who will lead God's people in the perilous days ahead are not those who have the most training, or the most experience, or the most money, or the most fame. Rather, they are the ones who have disciplined themselves to listen to the voice of God, moment by moment, and not only to listen, but to obey.